I'm going to start by doing the most important thing first, which is always how you should start, and that is thanking our wonderful hosts and organizers. So the African Population and Health Research Center has proven this week that not only has it been running for 12 years, one of the most important urban demographic surveillance sites in the world. Not only is it helping to build the capacity of multidisciplinary researchers across the region, not only does it do high-quality and impact research in a number of different fields, but it knows how to throw a party. We also on behalf of my fellow funding partners at Aphrc and at the Research Council of Norway, really sincerely thank the Population Reference Bureau and Marlene Lee and her team in particular. And we thank Nancy Scally from the Institute for International Education, who has tracked down lost passports, lost people, and fought with the hotel about overbooking. So I think we have Nancy and Marlene and their teams to thank as well. All right, let me have the opportunity to reflect a little bit about what we've seen over the past 3 days or so. What policy relevant research is or could be, and where we go from here. So what have we seen over the past 3 days? I'll tell you what I've seen. I've seen a tremendous breadth of research, but concentrated largely on micro-level questions around health and education. Economic variables have been thrown in. There have been proxies for them, there have been guesses about economic issues, and sometimes they have been addressed directly. But that has been more the exception than the rule. We have seen a heroic, ambitious model specification. And I think, I'm sitting here thinking, why is it that we are torturing our data? Why is that? Do we hate our data? No, we are torturing our data because they are, for the most part, not fit for purpose. They were not originally collected to answer the questions we are asking ourselves. And so we have to impose all sorts of heroics on them. And in particular, we are so dependent on the demographic and health surveys. I ask you, what would we have been talking about had the demographic and health surveys not been funded by USAID and conducted over the past 10 years? What would we be talking about? Well, that's something to think about. What would we be talking about? What data might we be using? We have seen so much brain power and work that represents so much time and effort by all of you to build knowledge to understand how to solve social problems and economic problems. We have seen really important efforts at policy relevant research to change the world. That's got to be why we're all here. It's a lot of work to do, everyone. So that led me to think about what's our kind of model of policy relevant research, and how well does what we do conform that model. And so this is mostly for the young researchers, and I think there might be a little bit of what David Lang might call less young researchers. So what is our model of policy relevant research? Well, the most kind of simple-minded idea behind evidence-based policy making, evidence-informed policy making. Most simple-minded model might look something like this. Okay, you have a research question, you marshal some data and methods, you generate findings, and you get better policy. Okay, so we know that. So instead we add communication to policymakers and then an entablishment of the policy brief. Okay? So that is all too often, I would say, what happens for our model of evidence-based, research for evidence-based policy. So but we know that that's not really working very well, doesn't really conform to how the world is working. So what can researchers do? Figure out, well, I vote for you to join an advocacy group. You probably all got like shivers down your spine. No, not join an advocacy group. You could continue to do research, but so there are a couple of, again, simple-minded ways to think about alternative pathways to do research. So one is you can start with your interest. What are you interested in? So that might be, I'm interested in whether there's a causal relationship between early childbearing and economic vulnerability in resource poor settings. That's interesting. You could start with a policy choice. Many girls in informal settlements in Nairobi become pregnant before the age of 18, and they and their children seem destined to live in poverty. Would outcomes be better if the Ministry of Health doubled what it spends on teen pregnancy prevention programs? So when you start with a researcher's interest, what's important? Are you interested? When you start with a policy choice, what's important? That there's a place where something's happening, and a population that it's happening to. That there's a policy actor, in this case maybe the Ministry of Health, or maybe the people who really control the budget, which might be the Ministry of Finance or the Parliament. That they can do something, they can double support for something, for a program, for a policy. When you start with the researcher's interest, here again, simple-minded, is what might happen. You might have your intellectual curiosity, which is one of the best aspects any of us have, curiosity about the world. Why does something happen? How can it happen differently? And you then look for interesting data. It's a natural experiment, and there's some way, it's an instrument that's going to work magically for me, some weather data I can use. You apply cutting-edge methods, and you apply that to the question. These are all sorts of things that you simultaneously work on. You don't actually, I think, sort of start with a question and then go find the fit-for-purpose data for it. You simultaneously see what data are out there, what methods do I want to try, what questions can I ask for those data and methods. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I think that's what happens. And what do you get out of that? Important things. You get a contribution to the literature. You get the statement more research is needed. And you get something that you call policy implication. So what matters in this process, or what seems to matter, I observe, is that you put a lot of effort into measuring the key variables and the relationships so that you require the fewest strong assumptions. You pay a lot of attention to defending yourself against questions about the robustness of or weakness of the methodology. And you try to perfect your communication, but to a particular audience, to your peers. So what happens when you start with a policy choice? And there are many people who do this. They do not, for the most part, publish in the academic literature. They are working in many different kinds of institutions, sometimes think tanks, sometimes policy research groups, sometimes consultancies, And what they do is they are responding to policy questions that either a donor or a government or some combination. There's a specific policy choice. They grab whatever available information is possible to marshal. They narrow down the open questions. They grab whatever data are available to answer the question. And why are they doing this? Because it has to happen quickly. And they use familiar methods, not always the best methods. They use what they had at hand. And often those are things they learned a long time ago in graduate school. What do they get? They might get, probably get, findings that are better than just a pure guess. They get policy decisions that are better than pure policy. So what matters in this scenario of doing quote-unquote research or analysis? Some understanding of the context, including the political considerations. What is actually the space within which this choice can be made? Data that are generalizable to local conditions, or local populations. An ongoing connection to policymakers and an ability to respond in a timely manner to their questions. And an ability to answer the question, are the findings, however statistically significant in a practical way, in a meaningful way. So these are wildly divergent pathways as I presented them. Do they have to be? Can they connect? No, in some ways they can't fully connect because the timing, the need for rapid response when you have a burning policy question is simply incompatible with the kind of research that most of you do. And if you're within a research community, your incentives are quite fundamentally different than those that drive people who have it see as a primary goal to influence and explore policy. But there are ways, and there are probably large ways. I'm going to present some small ways that your work within your own setting, pursuing your own path as academics or think tank researchers, that those contribute to sort of closing the gap between the very imperfect kind of policy-driven analysis and the much more refined but perhaps less, sometimes less relevant academic gap. So here are a few very small, very simple steps. I'm putting this in the form of a checklist, which I think could be the sort of minimum standard for your own expectations of your process in your work. When you think about your research question, think about a real-world problem you want to solve. Have your question motivated by either a short-term or a long-term problem you want to contribute to solving. When you look for the data to answer your question, use data from a setting you understand. If you don't understand the setting from which your interesting data set comes, that's part of the job, is to learn about it. Supplement the information in your primary data source with a range of other information. Perhaps information that's more accessible, more intuitively understandable to a policy audience. Talk to people who know about policy issues you're interested in and the meaning of what you're finding. Sometimes this is called qualitative research. Sometimes it's just going to the country that you're working on. If you're working in your own country, going to the decision makers or the people who are close to them, having a conversation to understand how your work fits into the questions they may be asking. Those conversations are always very helpful, and we've heard a number of experiences both in the presentations of the research findings and in the policy panel to reinforce that message. And in communicating, I guess I would say your first job is to be able to communicate with your main audience, which may well be your professional peers. So how about if we all commit that from this point forward, the only time we will say that we don't have time to get to the most important slide is because our watch broke when we were doing the rehearsal. There's no other excuse for that. And how about if from this point forward, we agree that the only excuse for saying, I know you can't read this slide, is if the power goes out. So I think there's a real need for all of us, myself included, to just get better at speaking to our own peers so that they can better understand, criticize, help improve the work that we're doing. And then perhaps most importantly is to talk to normal people, not people in our kind of professional circle, about the work you do, why it's important, what you're finding, what you still don't know. Those conversations can help you understand simply how to communicate with everybody else. And everybody else includes the advocacy groups that may help to take a constellation of findings about a particular topic to the ears that will listen to them. It will help you speak directly to the policy community. It will certainly help you speak to funders. And let me just suggest that it's not just all normal people who are useful for this. I have found the best normal people to talk to get subject matter from the kind of topics that we talked about here into terms that reach across to the policy divide, the policy community. The best kind of people to talk to are lawyers. Lawyers generally do not think about numbers. They generally do not think about the they just don't think about the things in the way we do, but they do, as it happens, think more like politicians and policymakers. That's just again, you may find something different. So that's it for my suggestions for what we all can do to close the gap between that root of starting with a policy question and that root of starting with your native curiosity and intellectual interest. They will remain somewhat separate, but I think that the gap can be closed to everyone's benefit. So let me just cover what's next. We have some homework to do. One is that we are reflecting on what we are learning from the findings from the evaluation that RAM did of the Top Cloud Initiative. And we'll put on our website, if you're interested, a short document that sort of says what our key takeaways are and where we anticipate going in the next several years. We will be planning the next conference. There will certainly be a next conference with our partners, and they will, I'm sure Marlene and her team will let you know as those plans develop, and we certainly hope to see you all there. And we will be exploring new ways to support high-quality, policy-relevant research on many of these same issues and others over the next several years. And I suspect that's true for our funding policy as well. I'm guessing that many of you are leaving with homework as well, perhaps some corrections with the input that you've been given. And I hope that one of the main things you're leaving with is a sense of connection to us as Hewlett Foundation, but much more importantly to each other as a real community of scholars from now for the rest of your professional life. So with that, I think it's time to say thank you and safe travel.